I don't envy Capcom's task of remaking the GOAT of the Resident Evil series. After 3's remake was released, I was hoping they'd remake Code Veronica, because in my humble opinion it desperately needs one to bring it to the modern audience. This is juxtaposed to 4, which still holds up to modern standards. While that may be the case, 4 was clearly the safer choice, but did this decision pay off for Capcom? The game has already sold well, but the real question is whether it holds a candle to the original, and whether the remake will stand the test of time.
1998. It's a day I'll never forget. The cop inside me died that day. And that night, Raccoon City was wiped out, thanks to the bioweapons created by Umbrella. Somehow I made it out.
The writers had to make a difficult decision when penning the remake script. Would they go with the campy tone of the original, or would they ground the narrative to match the previous 2 remakes? They went with the latter, and most of the goofiness that was present in the original is now gone.
You are tearing me apart, Lisa!
This isn't totally a bad thing, however. I say this because we still have most of the main story beats, and all the characters have returned. We may have lost the quirky charm, but what has taken its place is layered motivations for those same characters. One example I'd like to bring up is Leon's relationship with Ashley. In the original game, Ashley was a damsel in distress, and that was really it. Now she's much more confident, and her and Leon bond over the struggle they're suffering together. This complexity carries over to almost every character, and is a welcome change.
Nice.
Unfortunately, not every character has been improved, with Ramon being the primary example on the negative side of the spectrum. All his memorable traits have been stripped away, and all that's left is a generic, vertically challenged villain. That complaint isn't exclusive to Ramon, but he is the most egregious example.
I don't want his mother to see him this way. Look how they massacred my boy.
Even though I miss the tone of the first game, I can't deny that the narrative is told well in the remake. Leon's more badass than ever, and I was able to immerse myself in the game's events easier than before. As I said previously, this is because I'm experiencing a more serious atmosphere. It's easier for me to invest myself in a dreadful world, because it feels like there's more at stake. That doesn't mean the remake is overall better than the original, but it definitely takes its story more seriously. Whether that is better or not is entirely dependent on what you prefer. Me? I prefer the campy style of old, but that's enough about the story. How did Capcom improve the gameplay? Like the story of Resident Evil 4's remake, the bones of the gameplay are very similar to the 2005 version. You will still be navigating an unnamed rural part of Eastern Europe with enough weapons to make John Wick blush.
Oh my.
The only difference is almost everything is more involved than before, especially if you're going for that professional difficulty S+ rank. Prime examples are the parry system, treasures, and the iconic briefcase you use for storage. Starting with the parry system, players can now stumble an enemy with a well-drawn knife. That is, until it breaks. Now I know what you're thinking. But does that mean I can't cheese every enemy by slamming them on the ground and stabbing them incessantly? At the start of the game you can't, but the genius of the remake's development team is they never entirely abandoned the exploits of old. Once your knife is fully upgraded, it takes a long time to break, and you can really go ham on those poor European farmers.
Now stand back, I gotta practice my stabbing.
Tweaks have been made to the treasure and briefcase systems as well. While the basics of both these systems are the same as before, there are some added things one can do to make them more interesting, such as players adding passive buffs to their build using charms you can earn through the returning gun range, buffs like increased resource drops, or discounts when buying items. Hell, depending on which briefcase you pick, will add another buff on top of your charms. I did also mention the treasure system, so how has that been improved? More of the treasures you find can be inlaid with gems compared to the original game. Doing this will increase their value, but if you want to sell a bare bones treasure in a pinch, you can, but holding on to it so that you can completely ice it out for later is a much greater reward. Capcom also took the liberty to make each area more expensive than before, and they continue to mix things up by adding reworked enemies and some entirely new ones. Players won't always have to deal with these opponents head on though, because a basic stealth system has been added to the game. I do mean basic, by the way. There is no indicator if an enemy is about to see you, or anything in that regard.
You can't see me!
Another addition are the variety of challenges you can find throughout the game that will offer rewards that can be used to assist you against the Las Plagas. And the final improvement I'd like to mention is you can now hotkey your guns. Yes, you no longer have to stop everything to open your briefcase. Glorious. Simply glorious. Now, I've been singing the praises for the gameplay this entire section. Is there anything I can criticize? Why yes, there's two things I'd like to bitch about. One is the mechanic of escorting Ashley hasn't been improved at all. This is a nitpick on my part because I never found her that difficult to deal with anyways, but it stood out to me considering everything else was polished and reworked. Now the second thing does bother me a bit more. While the player is now able to strafe while shooting, they removed the laser aiming mechanic from the first game and replaced it with the generic crosshair you'd see in any other shooter. Not a huge gripe, but I felt obligated to mention it because I missed that shit. Besides those two things, the core gameplay is fantastic. But what about the side content? How's Mercenaries and the separate ways missions with Ada? Well, all the Ada side content, unfortunately, seems to be removed.
What?
Yeah, I'm sure they're saving it for DLC, but it's super lame they chopped it for the base game. It's a good thing Mercenaries is so fucking fun it almost doesn't matter. Almost. No, really. Mercenaries is just as fun as you remember, with its 4 playable characters who play entirely different from one another. But the map selection is a little lackluster, to be honest. Still fun and full of content, but it could have been so much more. They also added a special ability unique to each character that allows you to lay waste to all the swine trying to keep you from that high score. Gameplay-wise, I have almost nothing bad to say. I hope that energy carries over to the presentation.
Worry about your own skin. Foolish little lamb. Temperance, child.
Ashley.
What can I say about the RE engine that hasn't already been said?
It makes me horny.
Every time a new Resident Evil game comes out, they continue to impress me. I was running the game at max settings for the first 5 hours, and Leon's hair has never looked better. The locks, the volume, and the sheen are truly perfect. Everything else is impressive as well. Resident Evil 4's Remake has the most atmospheric lighting, and I expect this game to be a graphical benchmark for anyone who wants to try out their new PC or console. Capcom also made the wise choice of focusing on the horror when crafting this remake. Yes, this is still an action game, but a terrifying one at that. Some of the rooms you walk in have this dank air about them, and it puts you on edge. I was checking my corners like a Navy SEAL, but I still panicked like a bitch when I heard one of those blind fuckers coming at me. The voice acting and sound design in general have been greatly improved. Every character's performance has been refined from the original. Well, almost every character. Unfortunately, I must hop on the bandwagon a little bit here. Ada's voice actress sounds bored in her delivery. It's not terrible, but I can't help but feel like she just woke up from a nap when she's saying some of her lines.
Are you sleeping?
However, that one performance is the flaw in the sound design's armor. Besides that, everything is mixed and mastered exactly how it's supposed to be. Gunshots sound meaty, and the explosions in this game will rattle your teeth. Oh, and the music has been reworked to have a modern sound while still maintaining that old-fashioned flair. Let's talk extras. Yes, there's loads of content that I mentioned in the gameplay section of this review, but the beautiful sons of bitches who made this title took it a step further and added a shitload of presentation-based content. There are far more clothing options for Leon and Ashley, visual filters you can apply, and the character model viewer is returned. I'm singing too high praise. Quick, I need to be a cunt about something. The game did crash a couple times. I resolved this by turning ray tracing off, but I have an i9 processor, 64GB of RAM, and an RTX 3080. The fact I need more power than this is crazy. And one other thing is it appears that voice acting is off sync when you're in-game. It's perfect in cutscenes, but outside of that, I felt like I was playing an old Godzilla movie.
It's Godzilla!
That's all I have to say about 2023's Resident Evil 4, but you're probably wondering if I prefer this game or the original. In short, it's the original. Largely due to my nostalgia for the OG, but also because I felt like much of the soul has been removed from this iteration. It's like the difference between a well-done abstract painting and a realistic one. Both are amazing to look at, and it's obvious the realistic painting is done well. It looks real after all. But there's just something about those abstract concepts seen in the other painting. Regardless, you should play both versions, and the remake has more than a recommendation from me. Here's hoping they do Code Veronica next.